They did, that same day.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Meet the new lawyer. Get a new lawyer.
Is it totally done?
Yeah, well, I gotta get a lawyer, yeah.
Yeah.
Building themselves.
Yeah, I haven't driven by since it's been up.
Yeah.
Check it out. Make sure it didn't put you close to the street.
No. Check out the instructions, I think.
No, you did.
Everybody ready? Ready, Mike?
Yeah.
Good evening and welcome to the February 27th, 2018 City Commission meeting. I ask that you all turn off your phones or silence them, and we'll start with Pledge of Allegiance followed by silent meditation. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is consideration of previous meeting minutes from February 13th. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections, or any comments? If not, I'll take a motion.
I move we approve the minutes of February 13, 2018 regular meeting.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the minutes from February 13th regular meeting. Begin voting. Commissioner Griswold.
Aye.
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 Passes 5-0. Next item are, next four items are roll call votes. First one is second consideration for the charter ordinance number 58 exempting from KSA 12-3101.
Mr. Mayor and Commission, at the January 23rd City Commission meeting was discussed and placed on first consideration ordinance. A charter ordinance was essentially puts in the mechanism in place for the city to enact a stormwater fee at some point in the future. Once again, this does not set the fee, does not set the method of collection. It's simply the vehicle that we're going to use when we impose that fee. At the February 13th meeting, the City Commission tabled the second consideration in an effort to have our new city attorney be able to review this, as he will be instrumental in putting the ordinances in place going forward to impose this fee. He has done so. The second consideration ordinance that you have tonight has some minor changes that are reflected in your packet. Otherwise, there are no other changes.
Any questions or comments from the commission?
No.
Now, this requires a roll call vote, and I'll call the roll. Begin with Commissioner Bowder.
Aye.
Commissioner Dedeky?
Aye.
I vote aye. Commissioner Wilson? Commissioner Griswold?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Next item, second consideration, charter ordinance number 59 to repeal charter ordinance number 6.
Mr. Mayor and Commission, there are no changes from first consideration. Just as a quick refresher on this one, this was the prohibition that the city had put in place following a state statute that is no longer in place, which would forbid sitting city commissioners or city commissioners within their first year of being out of office from holding another office where they were compensated. So any former city commissioner would have to wait that year. The state has done away with their statute. We see no reason for this to remain on the city's books, and therefore it's on second consideration for you tonight.
Comments? Questions? If not, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Griswold?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson? Aye. Commissioner Dedeky?
Aye.
Commissioner Bowder? Passes 5-0. Next item is second consideration ordinance 8069, the franchise contract agreement with AT&T.
Mr. Mayor and Commission, this is exactly what the title entails. This is a franchise agreement with AT&T. The terms of the agreement have not changed from the first consideration ordinance. If you have any questions, Mr. Waters is versed on these kind of contracts, but they are pretty standard for city practice as well.
Comments, questions from the commission?
I just have one comment, and it's at the top of page 5 on the, all the specifications. It says beginning January 1st, 2004, and every 36 months thereafter. Is that good to keep in there, or?
That's very standard from a lot of the agreements I've seen. That language comes specifically from statute,
Okay.
say 12-2001, and really what it does is it sets up the starting dates so that you always know where you're measured in 36 months from.
Okay.
But that's a boilerplate language copied straight from statute that is then incorporated by most cities.
And it's okay to have that old date in
It is
something
because
that,
you're still always measuring
Okay.
from that
All right.
date, and I've seen in many other cities.
that's all I have.
Okay, any other questions? Roll call vote, begin Commissioner Bowder,
Aye.
Commissioner Dedeky.
Aye.
I vote aye. Commissioner Wilson. Commissioner Griswold.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Next item, second consideration ordinance number 8070 to repeal Chapter 14, Article 7, professional wrestling matches.
Mr. Mayor and Commission, this is the ordinance on second consideration that has not changed from first consideration, whereby the city would be essentially getting out of the business of regulating MMA matches, professional wrestling matches. These are, through our research, we've determined they are regulated by the state. If there is any complaints, any issues, they can be forwarded to the state body that regulates these, but this simply removes the city from being a part of that process.
And just for clarification, I think there's one scheduled for mid-March, somewhat time in March in the city, and it's using city property. They do come to us to rent the property. They have to present all the proper insurances, et cetera, to rent the property, but we're not in the business of now saying, is this a legitimate or sanctioned MMA type bout? Is that correct? We're close to that. So, and now the Kansas Athletic Commissioner is it the Boxing Commission or the Athletic Commission? I can't remember.
I think it's just the Athletic Commission.
And they may have a subset of boxing that falls under the boxing. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
No.
If not, roll call vote, begin with Commissioner Griswold.
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
I vote aye. Commissioner
Aye.
Dedeky. Commissioner Bowder. Passes 5-0. Thank you. Next item is new business. First item is citizen participation. This portion of the meeting is reserved for citizens that would care to address the commission or present petitions to the city clerk. And if someone wants to address the commission, we ask that they just address topics that are not on tonight's agenda. Anyone? Mr. Ferguson, please identify yourself and address.
My name is Roy Ferguson, live at 2400 Spring Garden. I'm just here tonight to get you on record of public that you agree with Paul Kramer that nothing needs to be done any further about the lack of enforcement of codes or the city planning on the issue that I brought before you.
Any comments?
And I'm speaking to you specifically, Mark, because you're the only one that answered my email.
And I did answer you that the city manager did review the issue with me and I believe with the other commissioners, and I'm satisfied with the city manager's actions on it, and I stand by that statement.
Okay, that's fine.
Butch, which email address did you use for me? Do you remember? Because I never received one.
City.org.
I don't have that one any longer. Matter of fact, I've never used it. In the paper, it gives my AOL. So in the future, if you need to contact me that way.
Oh, we're not done with this issue.
Okay.
Any other citizens care to address the commission? If not, we'll move on to the next item, which are general items. First item is consider approval of tattoo establishment at 2920 South 4th.
City Clerk Carla Williamson will handle this item.
Mayor and Commissioners, the Office of the City Clerk received an application for a tattoo establishment license from Righteous Tattoo Studios. They're going to be located at 2920 South 4th Street. Typically, the approval of tattoo establishments comes to the City Commission after it has been inspected by and approved by the police chief and the health inspector. In this instance, the applicants have asked that before they start work on the building and start construction, that they come and get a conditional approval from the commission on their establishment. Donnie and Amanda McQuitty are here this evening if the commission should have any questions for them on their request.
And just for clarification, our normal process is wait until they're moved in, they've had the inspection, then we approve it. But these proprietors are asking for conditional.
Before they sign the lease.
Understandable,
Yes.
you know, so the bank will say, yes, you're good. And obviously, we don't grant it until the police chief and/or the fire chief, I think they're both involved, are they not? And they give their approval, then the license would be granted.
Yes.
I just have.
Question.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
This was on the agenda, we tabled it 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, that was for a different location that fell
Okay, that's
through.
what I just wanted to clarify, because I don't think there was a photograph in the package this week, was there, of the new location? Maybe there was.
This one's out by, across from
Okay.
Applebee's in that
Okay,
area.
Yeah, we were
to-
having trouble getting Google Earth to
Okay.
get us a picture.
All right. I just wanted to.
But this location has changed. The other one was on 4th Street
Okay.
where the Air Force recruiting, or one of the recruiting stations is, Marine Corps
Okay.
or something. This one now is in
It's
the
in-
Applebee's complex, or the old Food for Less, whatever everyone refers to it as.
I got it.
So this would be the second tattoo shop that you own?
This will be.
Please come forward to the mic and identify yourself, so you're on TV.
My name is Donald McClity. Own Righteous Tattoo. It's in Bonner Springs, Kansas. We just are looking to grow. We've been there for 5 years, and the building is too small for us.
Okay.
Leavenworth seems to be a lot more up and coming and growing, and the population is a lot stronger here, so we figured we'd just have a lot better time out here. And there is one tattoo shop here locally, so we would be the second one, but this would be the only one that we own. We're not going to continue to have operation in Bonner Springs, just Leavenworth.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions while he's up? I don't think so, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
No, thanks.
No other questions, I'll take a motion.
I move that we approve the tattoo establishment license for Righteous Tattoo Studio at 2920 South 4th Street, contingent upon passing all inspections.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the conditional licensing of the tattoo establishment. Begin voting, Commissioner Bowder.
Aye.
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 Passes 5-0, thank you. Good luck.
Good luck.
Next item is review the transportation study from KCATA.
We're going to have our
This
city
is an item that's
planner.
near and dear to Commissioner Bowder's
Yes,
heart, but
Yes, it is.
go ahead, Mr. Kramer, I'm sorry.
I'm going to have our city planner introduce everybody here, but just to take a brief minute, what you're going to see represents a lot of work from a lot of really key dedicated community stakeholders, partners at the fort, at the county, a lot of nonprofits. Commissioner Bowder certainly very integral in this, and we're really excited about this presentation tonight and to share some ideas of some much-needed transit going forward. So, Julie.
Thanks, Paul. Mr. Mayor and Commission, last year we did enter into an agreement in cooperation with the county. The agreement was with Mid-America Regional Council, Kansas City Area Transit Authority, as part of Mark's Planning Sustainable Places Initiative for this transportation study. As Paul said, this was about a 9-month-long process. A lot of public involvement went into this plan. So tonight we've got Sean Strait with the KCATA, Laura McCullough with Mid-America Regional Council, and Corey Davis with KDOT, and they're going to present the final plan that came out of this process.
Thank you. My name is Laura Makala, and I'm going to kick it off by talking about actually our regional transit plan called Smart Moves 3.0, which many of you might be fully aware of. I recognize many faces. This is a plan that we recently adopted in September, and it kind of feeds right into this Planning Sustainable Places project and the specific Leavenworth transit plan that Sean's going to talk about in a minute. Just going to give you some sort of background information on our plan. So Smart Moves sets the transit and mobility vision for the region. Our previous iteration of the plan was more of a solely transit vision. This one really talks about mobility too, because we realize that there are places like Leavenworth where there hasn't been public transit in a long time, but people still have a lot of needs for going to work, going to the doctor, going to other places, and that there may be transit solutions like Sean's going to talk about, but also other kinds of mobility solutions, such as things like carpooling and ride sharing and bicycling and walking that you can do anywhere. So we're looking at the plan as a guide for future investment. It serves a 7-county region, including Leavenworth, and it looks out to the year 2040. So we really believe that public transit benefits everyone, whether or not you use it or not. It decreases congestion on the roads by removing single occupancy vehicles. If you have a elderly friend or relative who no longer can drive, it can provide them a way to maintain their independence. It helps those of us in the community that are not able to own a car for whatever reason to be able to get where we need to go. And it really also just is an economic driver for the region. So it's important that people can go and work where they want to work and where they can attain work and where they can get to medical care for everyone, not just for those who need it the most. We believe that transit powers business. So transit increases workforce access. We've talked to certain employers who have a hard time getting workers to their job site just because it's kind of not super centrally located, and they may be employing a certain workforce that doesn't necessarily everyone own a vehicle. We believe that rapid transit attracts development and interest, and the statistic on the bottom is really important. For every dollar invested in transit, $4 in economic activity is generated. So that's a national statistic, but we think that it holds merit here in the region as well. So transit empowers workers. What we mean by that is that transit expands job access. So it may be that without transit, people can get to a certain area of the region, but that with transit, people can get to more areas. Sean's going to talk about some of the alternatives that were developed in the Leavenworth plan, and one of them links the city with the Village West area, which then could link into the rest of the region, the region's transit system. So that would be an example of how it could expand access. Right now, we have a serious jobs accessibility issue via transit in the region. Right now, less than 10% of the jobs in the region are accessible via transit. And what we mean by that is that within an hour's time, only 10% of those jobs are accessible to most people in the region via transit. So we believe that transit also enhances communities. Transit is an important mobility option. It enables independence, like I said, for seniors and people with disabilities. It contributes to a healthy lifestyle. People walk a lot more when they take transit. They can, instead of just getting into your car in your garage, getting out at your destination and walking in, you often have to walk a little bit, and that really helps public health. Also helps clean the air, like I mentioned earlier. So 20% of older adults and people 20% of older adults age 65 plus need public transportation just to stay independent. Transit can build great places. Transit often is located in areas that have density and interest where people want to walk and interact with each other. So it creates places where people hang out for fun and for commerce and work, and it is the kind of thing that we want in our region, to have these places of interest. But our region sort of notoriously spends less on transit than a lot of regions in the country. In fact, we only spend about half as much per capita than the average of all of our peer regions. So one thing that the Smart Moves 3.0 plan really discusses is some funding strategies for how we might be able to increase transit opportunities in the region. And luckily for you all, I think Sean's going to talk about some of that tonight for Leavenworth specifically. So we have some key opportunities. We have suburban job centers that I mentioned earlier are hard for workers to get to. We have some east-west connectivity issues via transit, but also, like in Leavenworth, some north-south ones. So there is the desire, I think, from some in the community to access jobs at Village West or in other parts of the region. So there's that north-south issue, and also I think accessing the airport, so east-west from Leavenworth, are issues that we see across the region but are exemplified here. We want to obviously encourage redevelopment in our older communities. One thing that we heard across the board during our public engagement was that we need expanded service hours on transit. A lot of workers say, well, I could take the bus, but it stops running at 6 o'clock and my shift ends at 8, so that's not going to work for me. So that's one thing that the plan focuses on. We also know that there's a lot of emerging technologies that are going to become even more integral as time marches forward, vis-a-vis mobility and transit. People like to be able to pull up, the transit feed on their cell phone and know exactly when their bus is coming, that kind of thing. But also autonomous vehicles and a lot that we're trying to plan for, but it's not necessarily easy to anticipate exactly what the future is going to bring, but it's exciting. So our vision is to imagine a Kansas City region that provides viable mobility solutions, not necessarily your traditional fixed route transit vehicle, but other types of solutions that enhance mobility, that empower residents, and that provide successful business and vibrant communities. Our 5 key strategies are mobility hubs, mobility innovations, focusing on high demand corridors, building partnerships, and building vibrant places. You've already heard me talk about several of these. So the mobility hub concept is really the most the most innovative concept that sticks out in the new Smart Moves plan. We have developed a network of about 60 mobility hubs. What a mobility hub is a physical place where people can sort of easily transfer from one mode of transportation to the other. So you might think, okay, that sounds like a transit center, but we're envisioning it to be sort of more than that, because in this new world of transit and mobility, we want people to be able to, get off of express bus and get into an employer shuttle, and that takes them directly to their doorstep if, say, their job doesn't have a bus that goes directly there. We want people to be able to bike from their house, get on a bus with their bike, and then bike to their final destination. So that requires a certain amount of fabric too. And we have identified a mobility hub in Leavenworth. I think Sean's going to talk a little bit about how that hub could interplay with some of the recommendations in the transit plan. But certainly it could be a place where people could wait for a vehicle, where people could interact with each other, where people might be able to pick up a carpool, that kind of thing. Like I said, we want to focus on high demand corridors, so we are planning for some fast and frequent service, a lot more than we have now. That's a 15-minute or higher frequency service. We're planning for additional 30-minute service, and then of course there's still going to be some local bus service that is going to be once an hour or the like. So we are also, I forgot to mention, planning for additional express routes. We recognize that people are commuting from across the region, and that there's sort of a need for more east-west connectivity, especially for commuting, and so express routes make a lot of sense for that. We talked about a little bit delivering and integrating mobility innovations, such as an on-demand service. That could be something kind of like Ride KC's Freedom on Demand, which you may have heard of, where people can kind of solicit a vehicle, much like you would call up an Uber or a Lyft, and it can come quickly and take you to your destination. We're envisioning that at some of our hubs, we're going to have kiosks that would kind of serve a similar purpose as using a smartphone, but would provide that same capability to those of us who don't have a smartphone in the region. We're envisioning, like I said, automated vehicles playing a large part into the future of our transit and transportation system. And then also perhaps some employer transportation associations. So this could be a situation where there's maybe a business park where workers are having a hard time getting to, there's multiple employers, and those employers come together, pool resources, create an employee shuttle that could maybe link to a mobility hub where they would pick workers up and then kind of distribute those workers to their various doorsteps for employment. Another goal is to enable vibrant places, talking about integrating transit and mobility with land use. We think that this really can maximize our return on investment because, as we've seen with a lot of other transit and transportation investments, generally a lot of interest in the real estate around there is attracted, and the area tends to redevelop and attract new residents and visitors. So Smart Move specifically has a section of local development recommendations, and those are geared towards local governments such as yourselves. Things that those recommendations discuss are planning and zoning and housing, economic development, bicycle and pedestrian issues. So we see that as sort of a menu of options that local governments can look through and decide which ones sort of fit best for them. But these are things, these items can really help generate the activity and interest around, for instance, a mobility hub to make it actually viable to develop. So, you know, cities can perhaps look at an area around where they want a mobility hub, amend their zoning to really encourage a higher density of uses that would make that mobility hub viable, and then proceed in that direction. So we're excited about helping local governments implement the recommendations that they think fit their communities. I already discussed this, so I'll kind of just skip this slide. We really know that building partnerships are critical to success. I mentioned working with employers. Sean will tell you that ATA gets calls relatively frequently from an employer that's sort of located in an outer lying area saying, can we get a bus to our facility? And the answer is, well, it's not quite that simple. We need to kind of think about other mobility solutions that might work, and maybe a bus will work, but there may be other solutions too, like van pools and car pools and that kind of thing. So, Sean, did you want to hold questions till the end, or should I take them?
Go ahead and take them for this.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about Smart Moves? I'd be happy to take them.
How old is the plan? When?
September. Well, the plan was first adopted, I believe, in 2001.
Oh, okay.
And there's been a couple iterations of it, but it's undergone a major redevelopment, so to speak. So, yeah, it's relatively new. All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. My name is Sean Strait. I'm the planning manager with the KCATA. We manage the Ride to KC bus system, and I'm going to get into some of the details of the Leavenworth plan that was just completed. So first, a little bit of background about what is Ride to KC, what is the KCATA. So Ride to KC is a regional brand that was created about 3 or 4 years ago that brought together the various agencies across the Kansas City region that provide public transit service. The largest of those is the KCATA. We directly operate the vast majority of transit service in the region, but the Ride KC system also includes Johnson County, Unified Government, Independence, and the Kansas City streetcar as well. Overall, about 16 million annual trips, about 45,000 average weekday ridership is currently what we have. Now, the KCATA, I mentioned we directly operate a lot of that service. We are a bi-state agency created by a compact with both states.
What's the term quasi-governmental mean?
It means that we're a public agency, but we're not a jurisdiction. We're not a city. We're not part of a city government or a county government or something like that. So the existing service in Leavenworth, so we have the Council on Aging Senior Transportation Program, important, valuable program, but we've kind of felt that doesn't quite meet all the needs that exist within Leavenworth and Leavenworth County. So there's no other existing public transit service available currently in Leavenworth, and so that was known going into it, but we felt that maybe there was a need that wasn't quite being met, so that was really the purpose of us starting this plan. So the nearest routes that do exist, several routes provided by the unified government that travel to the Village West area. We have a transit center at the Walmart there on Parallel Parkway. We have a KCATA route that serves that location as well. We have a couple of routes that go up to the Northland, Platte County, near the airport. So those kind of two ends of our system would be the nearest existing service to Leavenworth. And these were both discussed in quite a bit of detail as part of the plan process. So as I mentioned, the plan purpose is essentially to find out what needs exist and how do we go about meeting those needs in terms of publicly available transit service in the county. The process and schedule, this is about a 4 to 5 month planning process starting in August, ending at the end of the year. We had 3 advisory committee meetings and 3 what we call pop-up public meetings. And those are essentially locations where instead of inviting people, come to the library at 6 o'clock and we'll talk to you about transit, we went to where the people are. We went to Price Chopper, we went to the St. Joseph Community Mill, we went to the University of St. Mary, talked to people while they were living their daily lives about their needs. And we generally find that's a much better way to actually talk to people, to find out what their needs are, and actually be able to have those conversations. So we felt that those efforts were very successful, and really the recommendations are driven by those communications that we had. We also had an online survey that had nearly 500 respondents, which is fantastic for an online survey. And also a social media presence as well that we felt was really helpful throughout the process. So some of the stakeholder input that we received, essentially the vision for transit, it should be connected, convenient, affordable, and these sorts of things. Really the highlight is a high need for transit. So that was something that was apparent throughout the process, is that we asked people to put it on a 1 to 10 scale of how important is transit in Leavenworth or how much is it needed in Leavenworth. And a lot of people gave us a 10, say it's something that's very much needed, something that's very much missing in the city. So that kind of affirmed the need for this process and again kind of drove the recommendations. Potential riders, workers, students, low-income individuals, individuals with disabilities are kind of seen as kind of the major groups that would benefit from such a service.
What about the elderly?
The elderly as well, that actually comes up in a couple of other slides. So there is currently the Council on Aging program, but there's certainly more need that exists beyond that as well. So that is definitely in consideration also. So some more of the need, vision, and benefits. I mentioned the high need for service. The other benefits that we're seeing as part of the survey responses and in talking to the community, potential for reducing traffic. For example, a service traveling along K7 down to Village West could potentially reduce traffic in the long run. Better connections to key destinations outside of Leavenworth. I mentioned Village West, potentially also Platte County in the future as well. And really a variety of trips. This isn't just seen as just for employment purposes or just for shopping purposes, really a variety of needs that were expressed throughout the process. Just an example of the survey, so the top 3 potential riders, this is where we include the older adults that was seen as a critical need, people with disabilities, people with limited incomes. These were seen as kind of the 3 key population groups that would benefit from the service. I mentioned the variety of trips. We have medical, employment, shopping, and then for residents and employees, people that live in Leavenworth, but also people that might live elsewhere and work in Leavenworth as well. So basically, this process led us in the direction of looking at service times focused on kind of the daytime weekday hours. So there's certainly needs that exist beyond that, but in terms of looking at the first step of public transit in Leavenworth, that was seen as the most critical need, was the weekday daytime hours. So that's kind of what the process was focused on after we got that feedback. The service types, buses on local streets, really the connecting local destinations as opposed to the more express regional connections. That was seen as important too. You'll see number 3 on that list is buses that travel between cities. That was also seen as important, but maybe not quite as critical, or at least as near term as the need for providing the intra-community connections. Convenient service, people even identified some higher level amenities like shelters with bus information, real-time information, Wi-Fi on buses and things like that, so those can be future considerations as well. Just to kind of show you the process that occurred in terms of the analysis. So we had the community feedback, the advisory committee feedback, but we also did some technical analysis looking at where people live, where people work within the county, and also the flows between counties and cities. So how many people are traveling from Kansas City, Missouri to Leavenworth and vice versa. Generally found that there's a much higher outflow of people living in Leavenworth, working in other cities as opposed to the vice versa. But it's a strong flow in both directions and indicates a need that exists for people traveling in both directions. Laura talked quite a bit about the Smart Moves plan, so in the interest of time, I'll go past that one. So I do want to get into the two alternatives that are basically the plan recommendations. The alternative one is looking at an on-demand flex type service operating within the city of Leavenworth. We've taken a shot at identifying what area makes the most sense in terms of where the destinations are, but this is certainly open for further massaging as we work with the city on what exactly that area should look like. But the idea is to provide an area that's about 10 square miles and to serve it with two vehicles that could be in like a 12 to 15 passenger minibus or a van, a variety of different vehicles that could be used for this type of service. But this is about the service area that we think is right for a two-bus operation that would run about 12 hours a day, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or thereabouts. Again, these are details that will have to be worked out as we move forward. But this is essentially alternative one, where people can have a on-demand service. They call and book a ride the day before. This is my address. I need to travel to this location, and they can have that trip. And it's basically curb-to-curb transportation that can be provided. So that's essentially alternative one. It's similar to what we operate in our Ride to KC Flex routes. We have 5 similar routes around the region that operate in a roughly similar manner, as in you call and book a ride the day before, and we provide a manifest for the driver, and he knows where all the pickups and drop-offs are. And we see this as a great first step to fulfilling the transit needs that we feel like exist in Leavenworth. I mentioned it can operate in smaller vehicles, so there's a lot of customization that can occur with the vehicle size, with the service area, and there's a lot of customization that can occur there based on the specific needs as we move forward. Considerations with scheduling and dispatch: when somebody calls and book a ride, that call has to go to somewhere. It can come to the KCATA. It can go to a private contractor that the city might want to contract with. Again, there are multiple options there that can be on the table. Alternative two, and I'll get in the cost of both of these here at the end. Alternative two is the inter-community connector. So this is a route that would connect Leavenworth to the Village West area of KCK. Not only is that a major shopping, employment center, but it's also a connection to the rest of the region. So we have a number of other routes that travel from the Village West area to the rest of the region, particularly downtown Kansas City, Missouri. So that's a point where people could ride from Leavenworth, they could make a transfer at Village West and travel to really any other part of KCK and also into downtown Kansas City, Missouri. So we feel like that's an important connection. So this is a fixed route. So as opposed to when you call the day before and schedule a ride, this actually has a schedule that you consult in advance, and you don't have to call and book a ride. Now the con in that is that the bus doesn't come to your front door. You have to go to an established bus stop. You can't really read this, but just to demonstrate the differences between an hourly schedule compared to a 30-minute schedule, essentially a one-bus operation versus a two-bus operation. We think that at least the first step would be to implement the 60-minute service, and if the need existed at some point in the future, to look at a more robust 30-minute service as a part of this alternative too. To mention some of the other routes that this would connect to, really the most important route that this would connect to is this 101 State Avenue route. This is a very frequent route that runs through Unified Government, primarily along State Avenue, all the way from Village West through Midtown KCK, downtown KCK, and into downtown KC-Mo. This is a picture of the location that we have at the Walmart there, where the Leavenworth bus could potentially connect to this bus. So getting into the cost estimates as part of this plan, these are ballpark estimates. These are something that I mentioned the customization that can occur based on the hours of service, the number of vehicles. These costs can change sometimes fairly dramatically. But based on the service that we've outlined in the plan, these are the draft cost estimates that we have. So I have the star here that shows that the Flex on-demand service was seen as the more urgent need within Leavenworth. And so that's why that's highlighted there. That would be the on-demand Flex service. While the connector route was also seen as important and needed, it's maybe not quite as critical as that inter-community connection. Additional recommendations, things that weren't really the primary focus of the plan, but something that we heard throughout the process and need to keep considering, and we need to keep working on and working with the community with. That'd be the connectivity to and from the VA, not just Leavenworth, but even in Platte County as well, something that we heard of quite a bit. Van pool programs, microtransit programs. We do have a van pool program at the KCATA. And we've had some conversations with the VA about getting something started. There's been a few kind of legal issues that have to be worked out in terms of what is van pool versus what is a shuttle, and some things like that that still need some time to work out. And again, not the major focus of the study, but something that we need to keep an eye on and continue working with VA and Leavenworth with, and Fort Leavenworth as well. I mentioned the van pool program that we do currently operate some van pool service, and there's certainly the capacity for more. People could van pool from Leavenworth into downtown Kansas City, for example, and we actually do have a few van pools that are based out of Leavenworth currently. Rural connectivity, this is a more difficult one. So this was a Leavenworth County transit plan, not just Leavenworth City. Now, once you get into the rural areas of the county, it becomes obviously a much bigger service area, a much more expensive service to provide on demand within the county-wide. So really the plan, we decided to focus on the city of Leavenworth, where we see the highest need, where we see the biggest potential in terms of actually being able to fund a service, where something like this is certainly needed, but probably something more long-term and will likely require some additional funding. So getting into some potential funding programs in terms of, and these are really focused on operating funds. So we have capital expenses, which is primarily buying buses, building transit centers, things like that. There are other programs that we use for that. Now in terms of operating programs, there's not quite as many available. We generally rely on local communities to fund service within those cities. We have contracts with 11 cities right now in which we provide service. In terms of federal funding, there's the CMAQ program, Congestion Mitigation Air Quality, although I'm not sure Leavenworth is actually in the air quality boundary mark, so that would actually be a program that would be more difficult to access. Potentially the mileage in Leavenworth could still be used or something like that, but probably not one of the best sources for funding in this particular situation. There are several state programs. One is the 5310. I believe the Council on Aging actually utilizes the 5310 program for elderly and disabled individuals. I've highlighted the 5311 because this is one that we think has some real potential and some real near-term opportunity, which I'll get into in just a minute. But that's essentially a program for small urban and rural areas. And we actually have and that's an annual process. And I'll get into that on the next slide. KDOT, for example, had a commuter discretionary program and occasionally has other specialized programs that come up that we can keep an eye on that could be of value for Leavenworth as well. In any case, there needs to be some amount of local funding involved, whether that comes from the county or the city. I mentioned we have contracts with 11 cities that pay us to operate service within those cities. We can apply state funds or federal funds in some cases to those contracts, but there is a certain amount of local funding that would be needed to operate these services. User fees, so the $1.50 fare, which is what our fares are now. Now the city would actually have the ability to decide on a different fare amount if that were desired. But that can generally pay for 10 or 15% of the service cost on average. It can vary by quite a bit. There's also the possibility of private or educational funding sources. For example, we have what's called a UPass program, several colleges throughout the region that it's essentially a pass program where they have a student fee, and that fee goes to pay us, but the students ride for free. So we have several programs like that as well. I did want to get into some of the details of the 5311 program, and we do have Corey Davis of KDOT here, and he's the expert on this particular program. I'll describe it broadly. If there are any detailed questions, Corey can certainly answer those, but this is basically for rural and small urban areas. So it's not generally a program that we can utilize for our core system operating within Kansas City, Missouri, because it is for more the rural and small city settings. Available for both capital and operating assistance, which is very useful. There's a operating expense. Basically, the matching requirement is KDOT would pay 70% of the cost, and the local community would pay 30% of the cost. Is the way that program operates. There is the upcoming timeline. This is an annual program, and applications would be due late in 2018, and this would be for 2019 and 2020 funding. We think this is a great opportunity to fund potentially the vast majority of the service that could operate in Leavenworth. Obviously, there would need to be some continuing discussions about what exactly that application might look like. There are details to work out in terms of who operates the service, who dispatches the service, what's the service area, so there's all that sort of thing to work out. But we do think it could be a very useful program to Leavenworth. Corey, anything in particular I missed, or? Yeah. Okay. So that's all I have. Contact information for the three of us. At this point, we'll take any questions that you might have.
Commissioner Bowder, I know that you know this program better than anyone on this board, at least. Give us your comments and your thoughts.
Okay. This is, we brought together a lot of people to attend these meetings to discuss this. It's been identified that lack of transportation was a huge issue in this area for many years. But, as we're looking at this, we're not looking at a certain income level or a certain age or anything like that, because from what we've seen from the Kansas City area and the users, they're all demographics. There are people who go to their businesses, there are people who go for tourism, to travel for tourism, to get from one place, to stay in the hotels, to get from one place to another. What I see more than anything, and this is a county thing, which is more difficult, is people going to the doctor's offices and not being able to drive. And so there were a lot of different things, and we wanted to hear from the community. So I think they did an excellent job of surveying the community to talk about the needs. And we did have representatives from the county, other cities. We had some veterans there. We had educators. We had people from all over that participated in this. So we just wanted to see what was out there. This has been my goal since I first got on the commission, is to look at this issue. And so the more we learn, then the better it is, I think. So.
Mr. Strait, just a quick question. If I'd catch the bus down at Village West at the Legends and take it to the plaza, maybe I'd have to change or something, what would that cost be? Is that $1.50?
$1.50.
$1.50. So that's what you would probably envision from Leavenworth to Village West would be $1.50.
Sure. That's kind of our baseline fare. Now, each of our cities have the option of choosing a higher fare if they so choose, and we do have some cities that do have a higher fare. Yeah.
And my thoughts on public transportation, I know if it's convenient, if it's reliable and safe, the people will use it. I travel different parts of the country, different parts of the world, and see some outstanding uses of public transportation, and reliable and available. 6 to 6, I know some people say, why can't it go till Ms. Machala, is that how you pronounce it? Mentioned my shift ends at 8 and ends at 6. Obviously, that's not as convenient, but it's a numbers game too, and our population is a little bit limited. If you get more and more ridership, obviously you can expand those hours. But if it's available and it's convenient and reliable, people will come, but I know there's a building process in doing it.
Well, and locally, Sisters of Charity and some others in the community have been working on already getting a van, at least to go around town, and
Right.
have been talking to the city about locations of where those need to go, just to get people to work, you know?
Right.
The bottom line, just to get people to work.
No, it's,
And even some of the businesses, like Bob Hatch with the Cereal Ingredients
Cereal
has been at those meetings too, talking about how to get employees to work as well.
and I think a few of us here can remember, probably stopped maybe 50 years ago, I can't remember. There did have local bus service in Leavenworth, and it was, I think, used quite a bit. People owned fewer cars there. Kids would jump on and ran the Ottawa line down Ottawa to 4th and all the way out to what we call Wadsworth. But you could take it to Wadsworth and you could walk up to Smacks and get a smackaroo.
And you could get on the bus at the VA and go to Kansas City, downtown Kansas City, which is what we used to do.
Yeah, we actually heard quite a bit of.
Take the one down at Pullman, where Pullman is now, and catch it down, go down Highway 5 in case.
We heard quite a bit of nostalgia about former bus systems when we were out at those meetings.
But, once again, I'm a strong believer that if it's convenient, reliable, and obviously affordable, $1.50 is very affordable, the people will come. The initial costs and getting it developed obviously is a hurdle that has to be breached, and it can be done, but has to be a lot of buy-in from various government entities, et cetera, because it never will be quite self-sustaining with our, we don't have a concentrated population base, and we're not New York City, Chicago, or DC or something like that.
But it would take baby steps. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
a
of
long-term
course.
process. It's
Yeah,
not
it is.
anything that's, and I know people have talked to me over the years about getting transportation here, but it's not an overnight process.
No, it is
would
not.
be
It is not.
It'd be an incremental process for us, I think.
Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
I'd like to make one comment, two comments. One, I think I was really impressed with the specificity of the study and the amount of time. It didn't really take all that long to get it done. So I just want to say that I appreciated the detail that was in here, and it will help us as a commission and as a city to move forward on what might be possible. The only other thing, Mr. Mayor, is that, you know, what role are we going to play as a city? And I think we have to discuss that, and maybe we could in the future in terms of a study session or a segment when we work on the strategic goals, devoting some time to this particular study and seeing what we want to do as a commission.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
Is this something that you think be implemented by next year or further
Don't
out?
know. It's up to you all.
I like it.
I think, given that we have this funding opportunity in front of us, I think some near-term discussions
Yes.
between
Need to
KCATA and
look
the city need to
different.
occur and potentially prepare an application for this
Right, we need to
program.
look at the funding options, obviously.
I-
And, you know, in different relationships here, we've got all these hotels that we're filling up, and people don't have transportation. So I
think
think
it's
that's an issue too,
Yeah, that's
to look at economic
Yeah,
development
it
and
might
that
be the
side of
time
it.
to look at it.
I should also quickly recognize one of our consultants, Mark Swope, in the room, who put in a lot of hard work on this project and was instrumental on getting this done quickly as well. So,
We did, thank you, Mark.
My only comment is that this started off, remains, and will always be a county-wide study. And we did focus on the city of Leavenworth, but having county-wide buy into this, and I think we've reached out to county staff and asked if this same presentation could be given at the Board of County Commission meeting. And then I don't think that we can truly go down this road without partnering with everybody in the county.
I agree.
Maybe in the city right now, but this is a dynamic service that could easily morph and grab portions of Lansing or Basel as we move quickly. It's a very flexible type service.
Right.
Have you been in front of the Board of County Commissioners yet?
not yet. Certainly welcome to do so. We have
Yeah, I
not yet,
know
yeah.
that the planning director over there talked to the county administrator, and he's interested in having them come out, and so I'm not sure if they've made contact, but I know that
Not
they're
yet,
interested
but I'm
in
more than happy to.
hearing sort of the same presentation that you all got tonight, so.
Well, I let the commissioners know that this was going on tonight too,
Good.
if they wanted to attend here.
You have some? Yeah. Commissioner Dedeke?
On your bus service between the Legends and Leavenworth, would that be a point-to-point, once you're on and you stay on it till you get there? Or if the person has to get off at Parallel or County Road 8, will the bus stop for it?
There could be stops in between. Now, some of those stop locations could be difficult in terms of having a safe place to get on and off the bus, being a highway. So those are details that'll have to be looked at. But most of our routes have many stops in between the ends, and you can get on and off. Okay. In this case, we'd have to do some due diligence in looking at specific locations and make sure that they were safe enough to allow for that.
Well, I agree with everybody else. I think we need it, but I'm concerned about what we need first. We need transportation for Leavenworth. We need to take care of our own before we branch out to Kansas City. We need to be able to get them to the doctors, to the grocery store, and wherever else they need to go.
To work, yeah.
So I think we need, in my opinion, we need, if we're going to do anything, is concentrate on Leavenworth, get it, even if it's a minimal service, it's better than what we have now, and then morph it on in and go into Kansas City. But that's my idea.
Good start.
And I would be supportive of that, but we got to look at the funding,
Right.
obviously. And that was a good aspect to finalize your study with the funding, because I found that very, very interesting in terms, and I know it's tough, but at least there's some lead time. I mean, it's this funding, I think, what you said towards the fall or the...
Yeah, they usually do in November, is that the application process? Yeah.
In October every year, we release an application that's due in November, and that sets you up for funding starting July 1 the following year. So, and then there would be a little bit of delay. Being a new provider, you'd have to wait on the vehicles that are ordered to come in and those kind of details. But realistically, July of 2019, you could have service.
And I know you can't tell us how much funding there is, but a town this size, we request funding, how much are we potentially looking at?
So really, realistically, it's based off your need. You're going to have a total project cost. Federal funds cover 50% of that, and then the state kicks in an additional 20%.
So if it's a $400,000 nut, one of the examples for the internal 1-2 vans going in Leavenworth, 200,000 from federal and then 80,000 from the state?
Yes.
So 120,000 what we, the city.
And then on the capital, county user fees, private entities, but yes, that mix, that would be the number that we were looking at.
Now, your 400,000, just your estimate, I know that's obviously purchasing a couple of vans. That includes 12 hours a day of labor, drivers.
So the cost is primarily in labor.
Labor, okay.
And particularly, and those were costed as buses coming out of our facility near downtown Casey-Mo, which is, so we're paying an operator 45 minutes each direction just to get to and from Leavenworth. So that's where we might want to talk about, are there other providers that the city would be interested in contracting with that could operate more locally and you wouldn't have as much of that cost. So the cost is primarily labor-based and what we built in there, but it includes mileage costs, fuel costs, and as well.
But that $400,000 we can apply for, even that's labor costs. It's not a capital cost, but that is covered by the federal and the state.
Yeah, so we'll have two separate programs with all under 5311, but our operating is that 50-30-20. The capital is actually 80-20, so you'd have to come up with 20% of that local match for the vehicles.
Okay. Okay. Commissioner Batter, what are your thoughts? Where do we go from here?
Ask Mr. Kramer I think we have to work with if we want to do it here in the city, we have to see what our options are and work with the Sisters of Charity who have already gotten a van that they want to get started with. But we need to, of course, look at things like locations for stops and that here. But as far as the bigger picture, I leave it to you, your expertise on that. But I think we should look at taking advantage of this opportunity if we can.
Mr. Kramer, can we work towards something that we can, you say the applications come out in September?
October.
For October, and then they're granted when?
they'll be due in late November, and then you'll hear about it in spring.
Okay.
Around this time.
Can we work towards at least making that application date that we, I know there's some steps in, and there are a lot of people involved, your staff, city planning, streets, I'm sure the police and fire, everyone else on safe places to possibly put all this together that we can work towards making an application later this fall?
Yeah, and I can't underscore enough the collaboration that will need to happen between the city and the county.
Okay, but if we're just talking about a city...
Yes, so you shouldn't look at Phase 1 or Alternative 1 as a city service. It's still a county service that's starting off in the city of Leavenworth.
Okay.
So this was viewed, and all of this was done as a countywide thing, but the logical first step was within the city. Not that we guided it there, but that's where the information led. So that Alternative 1 should be viewed as a countywide transit system, because it's just the first spoke of the countywide system.
Okay.
Well, Leavenworth could also include Lansing in this
Yes,
first step.
absolutely.
Yes, right.
Well, I'd ask that you do make an appointment and review your program with the Board of County Commissioners. Obviously, we need their buy-in on this. We can't do this completely solo. So I hope that you can get on their schedule. They meet twice a week. I don't know when they meet now. I mean, they don't have a regular schedule, but they do meet at various times on various days. But you could present to them, and I'd like to get their input on it, and obviously their buy-in on it too, because I think it's a very interesting program. Thank you very much for your time, and thanks for coming to Leavenworth. Thank you.
If you don't mind, can I add one?
Thank you
Yes,
very
sir.
much.
If you'd like to learn more about transit, tomorrow in Topeka at the Capitol is Transit Day at the Capitol. So come on out from 8
You got a bus going from here?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is review Port Authority board appointments.
Mr. Mayor and Commission, the Leavenworth County Port Authority, created in 1969 under the laws of the state of Kansas, created by the city of Leavenworth and Leavenworth County. The original document that created the Port Authority still governs how board members are appointed. The appointment of board members requires a joint approval by the governing bodies of the city and the county. There are currently 2 vacancies on the 5-member board. At its February 6th meeting, the Leavenworth County Board of County Commissioners nominated 2 candidates to fill those vacant seats. The BOCC voted to reappoint Bob Patzwald to the Port Authority Board on a 2-to-1 vote. The BOCC also voted to appoint Vernon Fields to the Port Authority on a 2-to-1 vote. Those nominations are now in front of the City Commission for your consideration. I've attached to your packet the LCPA agreement, including the information on how board members are appointed. I've also included the BOCC minutes indicating the nomination of Mr. Patzwald and Fields, and also the BOCC certificates of appointment. It is up to the governing body to determine what they would like to do with those 2 candidates.
Oh, I believe that we should take these appointment individually, that we handle. First of all, Mr. Patzwald, who I see that's in the audience, and I think all of us know him, and he's been a member of the Port Authority Board already, so I would entertain a motion, or if anyone has any questions of Mr. Patzwald first. Any questions for Mr. Patzwald or comments? I would take a motion to appoint Mr. Patzwald to the Port Authority with what's expiration, 2021, January 2021? I'm trying to remember.
2022.
January.
So move.
Second.
Okay. Is it January 2022?
Yes, January
Okay,
1st.
there's a motion and a second to appoint Robert Patzwald to Leavenworth County Port Authority effective immediately through January 2022. Begin voting. Mr. Griswold.
Aye.
Commissioner? Aye.
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 Passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Patzwald,
We
and
forgot to ask him if
congratulations.
he would serve.
He's here, he's serving. The next person is Mr. Vernon Fields, who happens to be a city council member in Baser. I've met Mr. Fields once or twice. I know him a little bit. I think he's a very upstanding gentleman. but I've not, I'd like to be able to be part of possibly this commission, maybe not interviewing, questioning him on how he proposes to be a productive member of the Port Authority with possibly some, I don't want to say, possibly conflicts of interest. He's a member, it'd be the first time a member of the Port Authority would be one that held an elected office. He's got the responsibility of the constituents of Baser. I don't know if that becomes paramount in his mind, and the Port Authority is all encompassing. There could be some items that possibly are good for the county that Baser doesn't like, and so, you know, how does a person deal with that? I also know he's time constraints, Baser City Council, and he's also running for the 2nd Congressional District, U.S. House of Representatives, and he won't know the outcome of that until August 5th approximately, and you know, that's a very, very time-consuming thing for him to go to. My thought is, but I have to get the input from the commission, is I would like to invite Mr. Fields to come to a study session or a regular meeting as soon as possible that is good with his schedule, that we can just talk with him, get to know him a little bit before we vote on his appointment. Take thoughts from other commissioners too.
Would it hold up Mr. Patswell's appointment?
No, we've already approved him. He's already appointed.
Okay, good, okay.
I agree with your assessment and your recommendation on this particular issue, Mr. Mayor.
I concur with it.
I agree as well.
So do we table this or make a motion, just table his appointment and ask Mr. Kramer to reach out to Mr. Fields and ask him to, at his convenience, his schedule, obviously we're here every Tuesday night, ask him to come to a study session or a regular meeting, would make time for him at any time that he comes, that we could have the discussion if he comes. If it's a study session, we could have a special meeting to to entertain the motion for the appointment.
I'd defer to our city clerk. What action would you like? Would you like just to take no action on this item and schedule it for a future meeting?
I definitely would make my recommendation.
So just take no action, just move on? But you have, you
With
know.
the direction from the commission that I will reach out as soon as possible to Mr. Fields and express the expression of the commission tonight and see what we can do going forward.
Okay, okay, thank you. Next item, mayor appointments. Please, I move to fill the following appointments. Convention and Tourism Committee, reappoint Carolyn Kelly and Edna Wagner to terms ending January 31st, 2021. Grow Leavenworth County, appoint Jacob Dale to an unexpired term ending May 31st, 2018. Sister City Advisory Board, reappoint Bobby Bauer to a term ending December 31st, 2020.
Second.
Motion.
I have
Yes, Mr.
Now, I'm sure these are great people, but I don't know anything about their qualifications or experience. So what is I mean, is this normally the way it's going to be, or do we get, get to have a little bit more knowledge and maybe a little bit more discussion about the people who are filling the advisory board positions? How's it going to work?
The way it has worked in the past, and I probably will continue to work in the future, there's, I don't have my list with me, it's out in the car, but we have 25 advisory boards.
Yes.
I'm grabbing a number now.
Approximately, yeah.
And I would say on those advisory boards, everything from the Planning Commission, Board of Zoning Appeals, and we can go on and on and on. I would say there's approximately 200 people on there. And usually we have, the mayor will select those people and put them up for nomination as done tonight, and the vote is on it. And either the mayor personally brings it forward, city commissioners are available to recommend to the mayor for an appointment, and I took one from Commissioner Wilson a couple weeks ago for the Parks and Rec Board. Quite often, the staff member or the chairperson of each one of those committees brings forward a name that someone has served or someone is interested in serving, and they've kind of, I'd say, vetted them somewhat, and we go. That's the way we go with it.
They're required to put an application
Yeah, they
to
have
the
to,
city clerk.
Yeah,
I just like a little bit more visibility. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure these are great people. I just
Yeah.
think collaboratively, you know, even if they had been a little resume or the application, I would feel more comfortable. I will
Understand.
vote for these individuals tonight, but I'm just asking for us to maybe take a look at a little bit more transparency and visibility on these folks as we go forward. The only other thing I'll say is that I don't think there are 25, I think there are around 20 or 21. That's an awful lot of advisory boards, and that's another thing that maybe we could look at as a commission, that maybe there's some redundancy and some functionality that could be combined. Because like you said, that's 200 people, that's a lot, and they're a critical portion of our governance model. And I'd like to have some conversation in terms of whether we really need 20 or 21 or 22 sometime in the future.
Yeah, and we can have that conversation. I'm in a strong proponent of having 20 or 25. We have closed some of them over the last 3 or 4 years, ones that had not met for years, had people on them that hadn't even met, so we did close those. But the ones that we have going now do meet on a regular basis, whether it be monthly or quarterly, but they do meet. Is there some redundancy? There might be, but I think the more people that we can get involved with city government, with the planning, with the economic development, the convention tourism of the city, the better it is. I want as many people involved as possible. I like the idea of having 200 people that
In our
have
community.
expertise, from sidewalk committee people that get down into the weeds and everything. I like that, but we can have that discussion. And otherwise, that pyramid gets pretty sharp very quickly.
The problem with this is the difficulty of getting volunteers to
Yeah,
fill those positions.
it's hard sometimes getting people to fill positions, and there's some of the committees which meet much more often and have probably a headier responsibility. I'm thinking of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Board of Zoning
Right.
Appeals, a few other things like
Maybe we
that.
should have a marketing campaign.
Yeah.
It's good experience for
Yeah.
those people who are
Yeah.
going to be on this commission,
Yeah.
10 years from now or 15 years.
Yeah,
from now.
and we do have people that have served on those various boards. Parks and Rec Board is a very active board. And we talked to our Parks and Rec director, it'd be, I don't want to say it'd be impossible for them to do their job without
Right.
these folks, but
Right, absolutely.
the sidewalk committee, I think Mr.
Absolutely.
McDonald would
Oh, we
say
saw that in
it'd be
action.
almost impossible for him, not impossible to do his job, but I mean, they do a heck of a lot of work, all gratis, all pro bono, and it helps the fiber of the city.
Yeah, I appreciate every one of
Yeah.
our committees and the work the
Yeah.
volunteers do.
Okay, any other questions or comments? We got a motion and a second to approve the appointments as moved. Begin voting, Commissioner Griswold.
Aye.
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 Passes 5-0, thank you. Next item is Resolution B 2189, 2017 Annual Report for Stormwater.
Public Works Director Mike McDonald will handle this item.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, this is the resolution that will approve the annual stormwater report that we submit to KDHE each year. This summarizes activity in the stormwater management program for the year 2017. Was reviewed at the study session a week ago. Staff has worked to clean up odds and ends and inconsistencies in the document, but there have been no substantive changes, and we've had no comments from the public regarding the content of the annual report. As a consequence, we would ask that the City Commission approve or adopt the resolution 2189, and we will submit the report to KDHE tomorrow.
Questions or comments from the Commission? Now I'll take a motion.
I move that we adopt Resolution B 2189, the 2017 Annual Report for Stormwater. Is that the only one I need? Not both of them, just the one?
No, individually, yeah.
Right.
I'll second.
Motion and second to approve Resolution 2189. Begin voting, Commissioner Bowder.
Aye.
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 Passes 5-0, thank you. Next item is Resolution B 2190, Stormwater Management Program.
Okay, I also move we adopt
Let's
Resolution.
let Mr. McDonald say something about it first.
Ready to move on this thing.
Mike.
Sorry.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, This is closely related. This is a resolution where the City Commission adopts a resolution supporting the stormwater management program, which guides staff activities for the upcoming calendar year. We have typically included a copy of this resolution in the report that was just referenced, showing that the stormwater management program was discussed in a public forum where the commissioners and the public had the opportunity to interact with staff on these issues. And with that, we would certainly recommend adopting Resolution B2190 in support of the program.
Questions or comments? Commissioner Bowder? Take it away.
I'm so sorry. Okay, I move that we adopt Resolution B2190, the Stormwater Management Program.
I second it.
Motion and a second to approve, adopt Resolution B2190. Begin voting. Commissioner Griswold?
Aye.
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 Passes 5-0. Thank you. Next item, consider bids for the Arborway Lighting Project.
Mr. McDonald?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, this is a request that the City Commission approve bids received to install a variety of underground electrical conduit associated with improving street lighting on North 4th Street. This is the area from Seneca Street north to essentially Metropolitan Avenue, commonly known as the Arborway, which came out of urban renewal efforts in the late 60s and early 70s, where the street was widened. There were grassy areas and trees planted and such. And part of that was lighting. They installed 6 street lights, and those were the only lights on this corridor. A couple things have happened. First of all, is the equipment is becoming more difficult to maintain, and community's expectations on lighting are that that's not enough. And as we worked to replace or make improvements to the existing system, it became apparent that we would be more lights more efficiently if the city were to remove the existing system and adopt Westar standard poles. We would go from currently 6 lights in this area to 11 lights, and they would be on the standard Westar metal poles. We opted to proceed with this with underground wiring, as it is more reliable, but it's also a better visual aspect for people traveling north and south on North 4th Street. The contractors that we solicited bids from will basically construct the underground conduit and go across 4th Street 2 different occasions. Westar will install the street light bases and install the street lights, and they will be added to the city's street lighting account. The city will then arrange to have removal of the existing poles and bases, and we will go on with lighting that's similar to elsewhere on 4th Street, and better lighting than more reliable lighting than we have today.
And this goes from 4th Street to Pawnee to the south edge of the hotel project, basically.
That's correct, sir.
That's where it stops now, because the hotel's lit up well enough that it was determined didn't need to take it all the way to Metropolitan.
No, this was, there's quite a few lights that come off that intersection of 4th Street that we believe that it was appropriate to stop it there at Pawnee Street.
And once we install all this, do we maintain ownership, or do we pass it off to Westar for maintenance, et cetera?
It's a Westar maintenance system, be just like other street lights throughout the community. There are a handful of street lights that are city maintenance. Most notably, a street light on a traffic signal pole is a city light, and 20th Street lights from more or less Spruce Street south to Eisenhower are city street lights. And we contract the issues on those lights out for maintenance. And we also maintain, lighting on Centennial Bridge from the west end to the middle.
Wow.
And we help the co-op on the other side with traffic control when they come out to do their light maintenance.
Now, do we, the city, pay the utility bill for the lights?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so they do. We pay the electricity.
Yes, for
Okay.
the Centennial Bridge lights, yes.
And if we do approve this tonight, how long will it be to get these new 11 lights? When will we see it?
Probably at 60 days, 60 to 75 days. They're ready to go to work. They're the boring contractors. We looked at this last year and we had a hard time finding any contractors. Apparently they've worked through their backlog and we got some good bids on this. So I think they'll be ready to go to work.
If I leave City Hall tonight and go to 4th Street and drive north to Metropolitan and remember how well it's lit, if I do it 3 months from now, it's going to be remarkably different.
Yes, sir.
Good.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
What is the difference between having some of the lights West Star and some of them just city?
You still have the maintenance issue with the city lights. The underground wiring is becoming more and more difficult to repair and maintain. There are different light style and light head, and I think the voltages are something very archaic left over from an attempt to save money in the 70s. So to do it right, you need to revise all of the wiring.
Got it, okay.
So you end up with spending about the same amount of money out of pocket to have half as many lights that don't work as well.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Mr. Mayor, I have one question.
Go ahead, Commissioner
Just,
Bridwell.
and I understand the rules in terms of low bids, and I assume that they were both technically acceptable, but there is a difference. I mean, the main difference between the firm that didn't get the bid and the low bid is the cost of the cable and the conduit, or so I think. But I'm just, is there a difference? Do we know whether there's a difference in quality?
It has to meet Westar specifications. These are both Westar certified contractors, and part of the specifications for the bid are that the conduit and everything else will be approved by Westar at the end.
Yeah,
of
just
the day.
there was, that's the main difference in the price. I just,
They
there was
may
quite a bit of difference.
have materials from other jobs. They may have a different arrangement with the supplier, or they just may figure on trying to get paid a little differently.
But it's a Westar standard that they're meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Not, I'll take a motion. Is anyone from Torgerson here by? Yeah. No? Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve the low bid submitted by Torgerson Trenching to complete the Arborway lighting project in the amount of $27,477.56.
I second it.
Motion and a second to approve Arborway lighting project awarded to Torgerson Trenching. Begin voting, Commissioner Bowder.
Aye.
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 Passes 5-0. Thank you. Next item, consider design services contract with Napier Engineering for New Lawrence Road.
Mr. McDonald?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, this is related to improvements that we have discussed for the last year. New Lawrence Road from 20th Street north to Muncie Road will come across. This is in conjunction with the new subdivision going on and the additional traffic that will create. Staff did conduct an interview process for engineers to determine the best engineer most qualified for this project, and selected Napier Engineering for the project. And we have worked out an arrangement with design of the project, created 31-foot wide street, curb gutter, sidewalk on one side. This is the design of the project. It's a fairly straightforward set of plans, and once financing is available, we'll proceed to go to bid.
Any question?
I just had a question. This one we didn't address last week when we were talking about roadways, right? Is this a different, I mean, obviously it's a different project, but we weren't talking about this last week.
Right.
During the study session, I was just wondering why.
Sure. So this project is tied to the residential development. And there was a consensus given by the commission that this will not be funded out of general tax dollars. It will be funded by the property taxes generated by the development.
I see.
So it didn't have to compete against anything it's being funded by.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Yep.
How many feet is that off 20th Street all the way up to a little bit north of where Muncie Road would punch through if in fact, I mean, is that like 1,100 or?
I think it's in that 1,100 foot
Yeah.
range. There's 1,500 foot road.
Okay.
I knew it was in here.
And it's being designed to reach to the point where Muncie would connect.
Right.
So at that point, there's the option to not have to go Muncie to 20th. There's a concern that going from New Lawrence to 20th doesn't gain you a lot. But if you have a suitable section on New Lawrence where Muncie can reach in, and now you have a new road leading out to 20th, it could decrease the overall cost of Muncie, both on the length of the project and in the tie-in. So
Okay.
that's part of the design, is looking at that project in the future.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'll take a motion.
Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move that we accept a bid from Napier for the Lawrence Road improvement in the amount of $35,300.
Second.
Motion and second to award the contract for New Lawrence Road Design Services to Napier Engineering. Begin voting. Commissioner Griswold?
Aye.
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 Passes 5-0. Quick question, Mr. McDonald, maybe Chief. We see 100 houses out there in retail development. Are we going to have to put in, and this is way down the road, more than a stop sign there at New Lawrence Road and 20th?
Anything's possible, sir, but I was right with the stop sign for a while.
Obviously, traffic will increase.
Be a good place for a roundabout.
Well, I think it's a good, Mr. Mayor, I think it's a good point, because, I mean, we're focused on that intersection, but there's, the down 20th Street and down Eisenhower, that, those
It's gonna
considerations
increase,
need to be taken into consideration, so.
Yeah, for sure.
If Muncie Road gets punched through, a lot of people can go east, west, east that way. But that's future item.
Essentially, you can go to 10th Avenue, Muncie Roads.
Yeah. Next item is first consideration ordinance to amend section 110-40 traffic ways.
Mr. Mayor and Commission, as I just referenced to Commissioner Griswold, the funding mechanism for this project would be general obligation bonds. General obligation bonds where the principal and interest would be paid by the property tax revenue generated by this new development. So these 101 homes in the two phases, the property taxes the city receives from those properties would go to pay the debt service. However, they still are general obligation bonds, so therefore to issue those bonds, New Lawrence Road needs to be considered a traffic way. So what you have before you is the updated city ordinance that outlines traffic ways. And I did want to point out that we did clean up some of the other traffic ways that have been added over the years as projects have been bonded. So just, we worked with our city attorney and our public works director to just clean up some of the terminology. But the only addition was New Lawrence Road, so that we're able to bond that using the authority of the traffic way.
Any questions about the definition of a traffic way or why we're doing that? Do we have consensus to move this item forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Next item, first consideration ordinance to amend Chapter 78, peddlers and solicitors.
Carly Williamson will handle this item.
Mayor and Commissioners, this is a first consideration ordinance to amend Chapter 78, peddlers, solicitors, and transient merchants. On October 17th and November 17th, this item came before the City Commission at a study session to review this section of the ordinance. This was just one of those annual ones that I kind of picked that needed some maybe revisions and amendments and stuff. So the basis of that at the time that we talked about was just to put some better definitions in that section of the ordinance. We added a requirement that the peddlers and solicitors had to provide photograph, which would be added to their license and had to be displayed at any time while they were soliciting. Required the applicant to submit at least 2 business days prior to soliciting to give staff sufficient time to process the application. We updated the application requirements, and the chapter also didn't have anything that stated what would happen if that were violated. If the ordinance was violated. So we added some language in there for that as well. At the time, the commission talked about transient merchants. At the time, the language said that a license could only be issued once every 6 months. The commission discussed that and agreed that we could change the language to no more than twice in a calendar year. And that just gave a little bit of leeway to the transient merchants so that they could, better plan if they wanted to use a facility. So the draft ordinance is before you. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer it. A lot of it was just kind of changing so that the flow of it was just a little bit easier to read and interpret also.
Ms. Williamson, peddlers and solicitors basically are door-to-door salespeople, correct? The people that knock on your door and say, I've got magazines, and you just can't, and you're so happy that they're there. So any way that we can make it difficult for, or make them jump through the proper hoops, I think people will appreciate, in my opinion. That's my opinion on my, any other questions?
No.
No, I just thought it was pretty good review. I think a lot of good changes.
Yeah.
So.
Do we have a consensus to move this forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Next item, consent agenda. Commissioner Griswold.
Yes, pretty straightforward and short report on claims/payments made by the city. I don't have anything individually to highlight this week, so unless there are any comments or questions, I'll make a motion, Mr. Mayor, to approve the claims for February 10th, 2018 through February 23rd, 2018 in the amount of $588,646.01. Net amount for pay number 4 effective February 16th, 2018 in the amount of $319,957.76, and that includes police and fire pension of $11,572.36.
Second.
Motion and a second to accept the consent agenda as presented. Begin voting. Commissioner Bowder?
Aye.
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 Passes 5-0. Other items, discussion among commissioners. Commissioner
I
Bowder?
don't have anything.
I've got
Commissioner Dedeker.
one item. Paul might be aware of this. I was approached by a Lansing City Councilman, Dave Trinkle. They are currently broadcasting their meetings and the Leavenworth County Commission meeting on their channel 2, as are we. He was interested in if we would be interested in also broadcasting theirs on ours. They would broadcast ours on theirs. This way you would saturate the entire suburban area.
That would be a commission decision.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Is there something to Time Warner, not Time, what are they called now? Spectrum. Do they have to go through, because I know Fort Leavenworth can't watch our, they can't watch our meetings.
Well, their channel 2 is different from our channel.
Yeah.
We can, as long as we're provided the video, which they would do, because they know what they're doing, and we do that a lot, share video,
Right.
then we could air it. It's not a technical difficulty.
And so Spectrum can basically flip the switch and say, yeah, Lansing's included and we're included?
No, we wouldn't
No.
do it that way. We would ask them to provide a copy of their meeting,
Oh,
and then
okay.
we would begin the next day.
Yeah,
We just put the
I have no
CD in
problem
our-
with that at all. And I don't know.
Great, yeah.
And can we, Mr. Waters, can we make a motion on that right now, or?
I mean, are there, the only thing, I don't think there's any downside, and actually, I think
I don't either.
sometime in the future, but you don't know. But I'll support it because I'm in favor of strategic communication, but sometimes I'm a little reluctant.
into it a little bit?
Yeah, why don't you look into it and report back to us, and,
I think it's fine, but I just
yeah.
think.
Yeah, see, yeah, tell us what's involved, and let's move on it. We'll hear back from you. Okay,
I'd like to see what,
Yeah.
what they're doing and what
thanks, Commissioner Day. Anything else?
That's it.
county's doing.
Commissioner Wilson?
On TV.
Mr. Griswold? I just have one thing. I want to welcome our new city attorney, David Waters, Esquire, right here. Welcome to Leavenworth. I know that you're from Leavenworth, but welcome our interim city attorney, and I'll give you the floor here for a little
Pleasure
bit.
to be here. As you know, yeah, born and raised in Leavenworth, graduated from Mentalata High School, and my family still lives here. Also in your seat, I sit on the city council for Westwood, Kansas, where I sit, so I've certainly spent half my time on your side of the dice as well. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to be here and to serve you in this role.
Well, good, thank you. We look forward to working with you.
Just one item. Mr. McDonald and I spent about 20 minutes standing on the brand-new 2nd Street Bridge today watching the 3 Mile Creek project. And if you haven't gone down there, it is a dramatic shift in the look and the feel of the area. I knew it was bank stabilization, but the clearing that's been done down there, and the aesthetic improvements, of course, the primary goal is to stabilize the bank, but it has made a big difference down there. So I recommend you going down and seeing it. And if you'd like to take a public works employee with you, who can explain what's going on, just let us know, and we'd be certainly happy to do that. But it's a really neat project.
Thank you.
When do we anticipate it being done?
I think their project was a 90-day project, and they're not quite 30 days into
Okay.
it. I expect them to not use all 90 days.
Okay. Is it just there, or is it further down the creek? Is it just there at the location that you?
Yes, it's from the bridge
Okay.
east to the river, and it includes a lot more than just the bank stabilization. There's some abutment, tuck pointing on the cross bridges, which the public works staff can give you some more information on, but it's a pretty neat project.
Good.
Ms. Williams?
One more question.
Commissioner Dedekey.
About a month ago on social media, there was a photo of some vandalism on the walkway, spray painting. I was just curious if that's been taken care of.
I'll look into it.
Okay.
Anything else, Ms. Williamson, you have anything?
I have nothing.
If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion to adjourn, all in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.
Thank you.